Good morning, all. Happy last day before the Friday. Hey, Jared, how you doing, John? A few things.
Is Tammy no longer?
She wasn't able to make it in for this one. Yeah, she's got some office stuff she's got to take care of. So that was
Okay.
who I was talking to. First, just a note on the solar credits. So I talked to Woody, who is the kind of lead consultant on this. He actually lives nearby in the summertime, so we had a really excellent conversation of just the order of things that we're going to have to do to kind of get projections versus actuals sort of figured out. He actually said he recommends doing that about every 5 years anyway, so this is the right time clip to do that.
For clarity, who was Woody?
Woody was the lead consultant that kind of handled the RFPs, handled the process. So he's done this, I think, for a lot of other cities and towns, and he'd done similar things for the city of Ellsworth, going back to or former Chair Beals days. So I'd actually had an initial conversation about this last year. So figured he's the person who set this up. He has some good expertise in this category. So we're working with him to work with the vendors, their solar credit providers. Sometimes it seems like there's probably been some ownership changes, which happens in these pieces, and we're going to do kind of, it's built into the contracts that we're able to get pulled reports for their yearly credit, the amount of credits they provided us. So we'll put those together. We'll do a look on kind of the contract on the projected versus actuals. I think Woody built it into the contract, and there was multiple bidders on these things. So they were able to get a rate for those plus a percent as opposed to an increase with the market. So which his expectations is that we've actually been beating the market increases, I'm sure, as you've seen in transmission costs and other costs of electricity. So, from what I've reviewed from the initial documents, the city of Ellsworth should be in pretty good shape. I think it was about $180,000 per year that was the potential savings versus market versus actuals. So, as I said, I guess best case scenario is they haven't been giving us enough credits, and we got hundreds of thousands of dollars that's owed to us, even though we'd like to get it faster. I think hopefully most likely scenario is just that the projected meet actuals and the contractual obligations, and we just have a good accounting of where we're at. I would hope that we don't review these and the opposite happens. They've given us too many credits or something, and then we'd have to be in a different situation. But what he said, we should bake into the process for about every 5 years, figuring out a review to look through those, and an annual sort of, here's where we're at, the projections. But we'll probably do like some spot checks of specific bills even after we get the initial reports on the yearly credit amounts, just to make sure that what we sent to Versant, or what we paid to Versant and have received in credits are all matching up. So
I think, isn't there a way to see what the city is, internally, to see what the city is paying when they're buying the credits versus what they're getting for a discount?
Ashley?
Yes and no. So the Versant bills that come in that are $0, we don't do anything with them. So they sat in the finance office for years and years and years, and those have finally been gone through and got rid of. We could pull those bills online, but we don't have the paper copies anymore, but we can get them online, I'm pretty sure, from Versant. But to go back and match all of those credits from the invoices that we got from the solar company versus the invoices from Versant would take hundreds of man hours to match
All
those
right.
up.
I
There's
just
not
wondered
an easy way
if there
to.
was a purchase. I mean, if you're buying credits, there's got to be a cost there. And if you're receiving credits on your bill, maybe going forward, the finance department could track that easier.
And I think that's part of this process is we're going to working with Woody on how we,
How much does Woody cost?
Woody's $340 an hour, and I think we're going to pull that out of the professional services. I don't think we're going to get a ton of time on this, but we need to get updated on our credits and figure out a way forward. And there was never an institutional process built in for this. So, as Ashley mentioned, the way we're probably going to do it is get the full reports from these individual providers. I'd also note that they haven't responded to emails from Ashley, the solar credit providers, in the past, so we were trying to do this internally exclusively. There could be legal costs to this. Ideally, we'll get an initial letter from me together that will go out and request these pieces. That's part of the contractual obligation, and we receive them pretty soon and we can go forward. If not, we might also have to send legal demand letters, but
Wow.
hopefully it doesn't come to that.
My guess is this, it's not what they said it was, but it's probably close to break even or above. I think the expectation of 26% was unrealistic. I'd be willing to bet a dozen donuts that it's not 26% savings, but we'll see.
What kind of donuts?
Boston cream.
Molasses.
The other piece is police parade presence slash beer gardens. We had a couple issues come up over the last 4 or 5 months, and I always note that when it happens as a one-off, it's like, okay, that was a unique case. And then when it keeps coming up as the police details for parades, for political events, for other things, and like our ordinance might need to be updated to provide better clarity in there. There's certain areas that are unenforceable when it comes to political events, ones things that have happened at City Hall, and other areas where, we ask for a charge to reimburse the city for the police details, but they refuse, and then there's a level of, well, it's a protected speech, and, and that, talking to our attorney, that they have a right to refuse, that if it's really for the city to protect those types of events. And then we are charging, other groups are trying to charge, like for folks that have a parade that want to do a cancer for ATVs to help money for cancer for a small parade that they can't really afford an $850 police detail. And, in terms of the city, I feel like, we should help provide that so we're not taking away money from, it's going to be going to cancer research. So there's sort of, and there's a few other areas and groups that just kind of keeps coming up where, hey, this group wants to hold this event, we need a police detail. It's also relative to like the beer gardens. We're trying to host a potential, have Black Moon, like a lot of other towns kind of use on I think it's called a non-contiguous alcohol permit from the state, so that they could block off, the section outside of their area on occasion to hold music and essentially extend their patio for a night to have a nice evening event and have some beer there. It's not an official policy to have police presence there. I think that talking to the police, they said in the past that they've sort of required it, or that's been an internal note. I haven't really seen a lot of other cities and towns that require police presence at a beer garden of that type. So to me, this is more of a, hey, we shouldn't have a detail there, have to be staged the entire length of the event. It should be more of the building themselves should be required to do ID checks, make sure that the area is fully blocked off, and and that there'd be a security plan in place, and that maybe the police that's on shift there would drop by a few times during the evening and are notified of the event, as opposed to requiring the business owner to add another $800-900 to their event cost to have a police detail. So while that one doesn't take a policy change, that was just sort of an internal previous city manager guidance. I think we're going to try to have a little process change to allow for those events to happen a little easier, but still have maybe like an internal policy on having those vendors have to secure that this is their plan for the event, this is how they plan to check IDs and secure it, and that we're notifying the police so that we can host those things.
Should we have, now that we're, getting our heads wrapped a little bit more around the cost that we incur from a parade or political event, it's probably something we need to budget and at the same time, get a sense of, how many on average, do we have? And because they're all important, right? Having these parades, having the, people's First Amendment rights and all that. So that's part of, I think the city's responsibility in public safety. But doesn't mean we can't budget for it. And then if there's ways, if there's instances where it makes sense to, to seek compensation, then I think, there's find that balance, but that might be, it sounds like you're working on that.
Yeah, I just want to check out the ordinance itself. A, the parts that are unenforceable for political groups, we should just get rid of. And B, maybe there's like a tiering up to the city council at a finance committee meeting so we can, hey, what do you want to do with this one? It falls in a middle zone.
Everybody needs the same treatment, and I don't believe we have any business charging these people for city services that we're already paying for.
Yeah, agreed. I think maybe that's the change that I'll come back to the table with, which is, something around those lines. And to your point, Patrick, we'll better budget for them per the yearly amount. Because as a growing city, we want to hold more and more of these types of events. We want to let the ATV clubs that want to raise money for cancer be able to do a little parade from High to Main Street. Of course, there will be a police detail for that. And then there's situations like the beer garden where I don't think we'll need a police detail for that. We shouldn't be charging, so. And the commitment, I was hoping to have the commitment with the mill this today. I've got the latest sheet, but I have one question on kind of a total valuation, and I've been waiting on a memo that outlines the total valuation changes. We know from the budget process around the 2.9% net levy increase of city services. But I've got some questions on, now that the final numbers are in for the commitment in terms of the changes to commercial, residential, non-waterfront, residential waterfront, how those distributions to cover the 2.9% increase of city spending is important. And I want to have full details before I talk about it publicly on this is what the mill rate's going to be. And, and this is how the distribution of this mill rate based on valuation changes are going. So I've had a few conversations this week. I came in on my day off a couple times, or days off a couple times, but this is probably the hardest part about being city manager. It's the part I like the least, is sending out the tax bills, and also not just with the tax bills, but citizens need the information on why their tax bill is changing, because I wish it was as simple as it's 2.9% increase of the budget and everybody gets a 2.9% increase on their tax bill. But because of the way valuations and assessments and revenue sharing and getting to 100% of your certified ratio with the state, it's actually a much more complicated process. It's almost certainly going to be a mill rate reduction. It could be a substantial mill rate reduction, but it won't necessarily mean a lowering of taxes. It's a lowering of the general mill rate, and I hope to have that later today, which I'll send out to council, that memo. We were hoping to send a circle printing today so that they could start sending out bills on Tuesday. Obviously, we have a long holiday weekend, but I apologize. I don't have the information I need to talk about that publicly just yet. And that is it for me.
Good morning. First of all, the FY24 audit, just so everyone's aware, citizens, that the audit is posted on the city website. We have, myself and Ashley have put all the auditor entries, journal entries in for FY24 so we can get that fiscal year closed out. Many pages of journal entries have been finalized, so that is done. Now we're working on getting the FY25 done on our side, looking at meeting with Charlie and Sarah next week and Ashley to kind of go over encumbrances, what's available, discuss that so that can be presented. Also, just a heads up for the council as well as citizens that next Thursday's meeting will include Sue Lessard, who will be here to discuss what she is working on with the finance team as well as other departments. And also Ron Smith from RHR, the auditing firm, will be here as well. Well, he'll be virtually present to discuss the audit. He also will, I did get the confirmation a couple days ago, they will be able to be at September's council meeting on the 15th. So we'll have RHR on next Thursday as well as the council meeting on the 15th. So those are just the general updates that I have on my side.
Yeah, I know we'll talk a little more on encumbering with the conversation last week, which was excellent with Sue Lessard on we've still got some tax reconciliation on the tax side of things, and on the utility side of things. And, until we're kind of fully reconciled with what I would say is a defendable undesignated fund balance to date, I have qualms about encumbering anything that's not relative to like a capital project. If it's a hard capital projects, then of course that I feel is a defendable encumbrance to move over, but probably need to talk to the finance teams about any other piece. We got to get back to a undesignated fund balance as part of our toolkit before we can say, hey, we want to bring in funding for this piece. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. And this could be a tough conversation next Thursday, and I want to encourage council to be there. But hold us accountable. And I think Sue's going to talk about kind of how she sees the role, or what the role the council wants in these processes as well. I think the only way you move forward in stuff like this is to have a lot of sunshine on it and to have a lot of people. And I think we do have the team here that is hell-bent on getting us back to that 2015 National Finance Awards for the city of Ellsworth. Took, about 5 years to get us into this mess. We're about a year and a half into digging out of it. We've made incredible progress, especially on the budget side of things. Especially in the software transition, especially on, Big Finance Fridays and Thursdays now, and trying to get more in-depth views on month to month. But now we got to get back in the weeds a little bit too, as a staff, to get those other policies and procedures fully ironed out. I know the whole team, from Sue and our finance team, but also department heads. As Sue Lassard has been talking to department heads just about how we do all kinds of policies and procedures. And I'm also looking at procurement practices and how we can kind of modernize those systems so that they're very straightforward, transparent, public, and the city's getting the best deal that we can. There's a lot of things that are going to be hard to keep over future years, infrastructure costs, et cetera, to a low rate, but we can make sure that our internal budget practices and financing practices and procurements are near perfect, and I know this team's looking forward to doing so.
Do you anticipate the kind of one of the end products with Sue is obviously improvement in our systems and better understanding, but also like creating like standard operating procedures, policies, like, and then that's being like in writing, so one day when whatever, none of us are here, that they can turn to that and we can hopefully have that continuity.
That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, manual.
Yeah.
And manual on that, and a manual on assessment too. We've just, we've got a portion of that memo now with Nate and Sue have worked on kind of what happens on their side of things when we get there. But we have a new staff. I know the management team meeting recently, I asked, who's been in your position for longer than 5 years, and only 2 people in a room of 20 raised their hand. So we've got a lot of training to do. We've got a lot of, like, as I've said, Michelle and Tammy kind of wrote the book. They left. The books got put on shelves, and we got to write new books. So I do expect that to be in kind of one of the products here for those things that, you really can, based on our systems. Now, we changed systems. We changed all kinds of things over the last 4 years. We've learned a lot, and we've increased as a city pretty significantly in complexity. So we kind of needed to write new books anyways, and absolutely, that should be, I think that's even a SMART goal for.
Great. Yeah, and then also having those then accessible to the public too, and like in the public, forum, and then, because then other municipalities can draw from it, but also the citizens of Ellsworth can be like, hey, how are they doing this? And,
Yeah.
Unless they want to come, some of our more active citizens come to the meetings to find out, but the rest of the folks might want to, I think that's great. It goes to the transparency, and it shows our work too. Like, hey, this is what we're doing. This is what we've been working on. So I think that's important.
Absolutely. And to me, there's a big systems problem here. I've talked to the state auditor in the past on this, and a lot of other cities and towns in this, and similar type situations. There's other counties too. There's been a few news stories on those that, the complexity of cities and towns have grown, and the ability internally to kind of have finances follow that hasn't. Now, that's not an excuse. Ellsworth is a big enough city that we can get this perfect. We have a great team in place. So trying to get there as quickly as possible.
Public comment.
Good morning, Jared, resident. So, just like to get some clarity, you talked about the parade ordinance and possibly reworking that and moving away from any fees. Would that also coincide with looking into the mass gathering permit? I don't feel like I feel like if you're gonna get rid of the fees for the parade, like the mass gathering permit almost goes hand in hand with this sort of stuff. And I don't think that we should be charging fees for gatherings, but I also feel like the process should still be there for people to sign up the application that therefore would notify the city officials on the days and times and whatnot as kind of like a trigger to put people on notice. But I think the additional fees for all this stuff can add up really quickly. So I didn't know if they were going to kind of coincide, or you're just going to look directly at the parade ordinance on that.
Hunter, it's actually, I think, the mass gatherings, and sorry, I might have misspoken there, that's almost the more important one. That's the one where you, in some ways, you
Yeah.
can't even charge, it's not legal to.
Yeah.
And there's like a level of, let's say they refuse and they, like, we're still gonna try to secure this event. Like, it's,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it would be irresponsible for the city not to. So I do think we'll probably streamline those. It won't likely be, to your point, Patrick, we'll need to budget better for it. But as a growing modern city, we need to be just a lot easier. And then the process too, Jared. I think that's where it's going to kind of, you know, the details will come in. I think those types of things should probably come through our Parks and Recreation, Economic Development area, and then required for maybe a security plan or how they hold the event and a notification to the police. Right now, it's a little difficult. The citizens themselves are trying to like go through a lot of different departments to try to find it. So how we can streamline the, hey, if you'd like to hold this type of event, here's how you do it. Here's our different city areas where you can do so. It's just a good customer service thing too.
Awesome. And I was also curious about the porta potty ordinance, and if we'd be looking into that at all.
Porta potty ordinance, yeah, we're, right now, we're considering potentially adding some, it's been a big concern for local business owners, the increase in visitation and tourism and downtown bathroom usage. I think one business owner said, I really want to give a bill for all the toilet paper. It's just exploded in use. And a lot of cities of our size, they have public downtown restrooms available. So we sort of put a Band-Aid on that this year with some porta potty, and we're, our code officer is offering an extension. It's not an ideal use. We're making sure it's cleaned up, and we're also looking to potentially look at some more permanent or semi-permanent type structures that could be downtown. It could be in this area. It could be in the Merrill Parklet. There's some other options that we want to look into, and we'll start bringing them to council. But it's not the most, what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, the most fun thing to talk about. But when you have increase in visitation and more people, you got to figure out places for them.
It's infrastructure.
Yeah.
And infrastructure is rarely exciting to talk about, but we notice it when it's not there.
And the Porta-John isn't a permanent solution to those pieces. So,
No. But there's also other people, just not the downtown. You have seasonal camp owners, and their septics are failing. And instead of forcing them to use a septic that's failing and possibly going into drinking water and stuff, with the waterfront taxes, some of these people that have had them a long time can't afford to address their septics right now. And I feel like it's a better option that they can put a porta potty on their property for the 4 or 5 months that they use it in the summertime versus putting money. And I know they had grants out a while ago, but not all the property owners that had failing septics on the waterfront took.
yeah, let me.
applied for those.
Who's lead on the ordinance changes?
Robert,
Robert. Let me just ping Robert, and we'll put a tag on that for the consultant that's coming in to talk about the ordinance changes, and then they can make it part of that consideration.
Awesome.
Yeah, just on that note, Jared, I agree, like, if there's ways to provide relief in that area. At the same time, that's a state-regulated
It is.
issue, so there's only so much we can do. Ultimately, Department of Health and Human Services subsurface wastewater regs are
Oh,
they control. So, but if there's ways to find, the way, yeah, exactly. So we'll, yeah.
Awesome.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Thanks for raising that.
Well, thank you. You guys have a great weekend.
Thanks,
Thank you,
too.
Jared.
I'd like to speak on that a little bit. The state may regulate that, but does the state enforce that? And can the city allow the state to enforce it and not the city to enforce it? Because a porta potty is certainly the sanitary way to handle it. It's a limited septic tank that people are getting pumped every 2 to 3 years. And the porta potty is getting contained and pumped every week or every 2 weeks. So it's really the answer. And the city of Portland, this doesn't address Jared's Branch Lake chat, but the city of Portland has public restrooms that is not attracted to shelter. The bottom 2 feet is open. So it provides security, it's a direct shot to the sewer system, but it's not attracting, it's a permanent structure, but it's not attracting attention because the underside is viewable.
Yeah. Oddly enough, I had a very long conversation. I think his name is Toilet Tommy, or so he's basically like
It's Carrie Tyson. I introduced you at, I think, the Downtown Center Conference, and he is
he's kind of like the
master
Cara.
of toilet.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, yeah.
To your point, Steve, they can become like drug havens for folks, and we had some really interesting conversations about like that aspect as well, because they become shelters, and they had some kind of fits and starts with what you'd think it's a kind of straightforward problem. But Bangor also had some issues too, where they tried to install things and they had to
Right.
take them out. So I've looked into there's some like very expensive ones from Canada that are self-cleaning. Like you basically at once an hour, there's just like whoosh, it jets everything down, because cleaning them becomes an issue too. Yeah, it's, but to your point, Steve, I think that's the ones that are under consideration. It's kind of like the more cheaper. I think Bangor has a couple of these now in Portland that do have the gaps in the bottom.
Yeah, there's no reason for more than 2 legs to be in there.
Right. And we've had issues with kids trashing the ones at Knowlton Park. I think this is kind of a perennial issue for cities and towns that provide public restrooms, is cleaning, maintenance, kids defacing them. They have some window issues where they've been like stealing the knobs, I guess, off of them. So let's make sure the next round that they're as plug and play as possible, and we don't create a bunch of new issues too.
Any other public speakers?
Okay.
Great.
Thank you all.
Thank you.